Is there a central website where ideas can be flagged up, where ideas can be posted, and people can look at them and judge them and say, hey, that's working really well in Manchester, let's see if it works in Portsmouth?
Well, there are many of those. There are things like the Institute for Innovation Improvement. We've had them for years. We had the Modernisation Agency, if you remember. It isn't that there is a lack of those kind of central mechanisms. It's actually, as would be true in the whole of the private sector as well, it's that information needs to be taken up by people who have an incentive to make it work. Now, if people in healthcare provision have an incentive to deliver the best outcomes, they will look for the best ways of doing that. And that diffusion of best practice across the NHS has been something that has been, I think, a holy grail that we have never reached up to now. It has been something that has happened only fitfully on the basis of personal relationships. It needs to become something that happens automatically because the incentive supports it, the incentive structure supports it.
And what's the difference that the patient, the recipient of the outcomes, is going to notice in 3 years' time if you are successful in driving forward innovation? What's going to be different?
Well, for patients, number one, their sense of, I know what is available, what is happening to me, why it is happening to me, and I have an influence and direct say about what happens to me. Secondly, that the clinicians who are responsible for their care, who look after them, are also the people who have a say about what the system is as well, that the system backs up the doctors and nurses and health professionals looking after them. And then thirdly, we should improve outcomes. They should be able to look at things like, that they have a safe experience, that they don't have avoidable infections, that events never happen, that the outcome of their treatment, they have very high potential for success for those treatments. That basically is the position. Patients who are more empowered, clinicians who look after them are more empowered, results that we deliver for patients.
And what's going to be the hardest bit of all the changes that you're proposing?
Do you know what's hardest? Change itself is the hardest thing. Just that things move and people have a sense. And I know there's a lot of, I don't know how many here are working in strategic health authorities or primary care trusts. The business of shifting resources and people to the front line, the business of getting from a top-down system to a bottom-up system does involve change for some people.
And pain as well?
For some people it will. Of course it will, because change is not always easy. I mean, the experience of everybody in change is, firstly, you have to understand, why are we doing this thing? And we know why we're doing this thing, so that we can deliver the best possible outcomes for patients, because there are people the length and breadth of the National Health Service, including managers, many good managers in the health service, who said to me, if only they would let us get on with it, we could do it so much better. Well, the managers, the clinicians, everybody now has an opportunity to do it better. But I know what it's like. When you start change and you move a system through a change process, there is denial and resistance, but then there is understanding, and then there is innovation, and then there is enthusiasm. And we're travelling along that curve.
And you would anticipate some pretty big changes for the staff. You have to take them with you on this journey, haven't you?
Well, depending on where you are. I mean, actually, for people working in, for example, hospital trusts and foundation trusts, people working in general practice and community services, actually, this should be more empowering than simply changing. It is a big change for people who work in the management systems of the National Health Service. Of course it is. There's going to be a much more autonomous national commissioning organisation. There will be changes in the way in which people at strategic health authorities and primary care trusts work. There will be a transfer into local authorities. There will be a transfer into the new commissioning consortia. So for management inside the NHS, and there's 36,000 managers and senior managers, there's another 200,000 people working in administration in the National Health Service, it's a big change for them. For clinicians, it's more empowering than changing.
Are you ever slightly scared at what you've taken on? I mean, there was a suggestion that Downing Street, left you to it, and then they were, when they actually sat down and looked at the changes you were proposing, everyone was a little bit shocked, saying, hey, I didn't think Andrew would go that far.
You're still, Martin, you're just somebody who has spent a lifetime in the media. You have a tendency to believe what you read and see in the media. You shouldn't believe it all. Look, the reason why David Cameron was clear about, didn't have to interfere with for example, with the white paper, well, I mean, it was all collective discussion. The point is, we have spent years making this clear. I mean, give you one example. I've been describing today how at the heart of this is the concept we must move from targets and processes to outcomes. Do you know when that was first, that that principle driving our reforms was first enunciated in January 2006 by David Cameron in Bristol. You know, he set it out. So people shouldn't be surprised that he's not constantly kind of trying to interfere with a process of modernisation in the National Health Service, a process of public sector reform that he set out very clearly before the election.
Right, so you're working to the mandate. Yeah, delivering in spades. Okay, can we take some questions? Who'd like to? Yes, I think the gentleman there. Could you wait for a microphone to wend its way to you from the lady just there? And if you could just give us your name and where you're from, the organisation you represent. Thank you.
Dr. Paul Williams, an NHS consultant at the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff. If a foundation trust should innovate so as to develop an innovation, thus giving it a commercial advantage, what is the economic incentive to give up that commercial advantage and share that information? How do you deal with that?
Forgive me, I wasn't very... If a hospital trust or a foundation trust has a commercial development, let's say, okay, what's their advantage in spreading it?
If clinicians within a foundation trust were to innovate so as to do something better and cheaper, ideally you would wish that to be shared right across the health service.
Yep.
However, that would entail that trust giving up a commercial advantage over potential competitor trusts. So how will you deal with that situation?
Well, of course, what happens in any walk of life is people who deliver a service better and innovate in order to deliver a service better, they do take an advantage, but of course the advantage only lasts for a short period of time because other people copy them. And now, if you're talking about something to which intellectual property is attached, say, for example, I was seeing the Designs for Dignity commode that Sheffield Hospitals Trust have developed. Of course, they have, if I understand it correctly, and Andrew Cash was telling us about this last night, that it now forms part of a spin-out company that is commercialising that innovation because there is intellectual property engaged in that. So from their point of view, actually, they derive direct benefit from wider take-up of that technology. So the difference is between are you designing something that gives you, as it were, an advantage, and GPs will refer patients and patients will choose to come to you, but people will copy you, and that advantage only lasts for a short period of time. Then you have to continuously improve. If there's intellectual property, you can take a direct benefit from the commercialisation of that intellectual property.